wooden bridges, check out these 10 most dangerous ways kids have been known to get to school. But before we begin, I've noticed that most of you watching this aren't subscribed yet. If you do like our videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It's absolutely free, and you can always change your mind later. Number 10. A damaged suspension bridge. In early 2012, heavy rains in Lebak district, Indonesia, wrecked several suspension bridges over the Ciberang River, which naturally made movement a bit of a problem for the residents, including elementary school kids. For a safer passage, the area residents would have had to take a 3-mile detour, an option that wasn't exactly attractive for most of the younger crowd. They chose to instead stick to one of the broken suspension bridges that promised a shorter commute time despite being significantly unsafe. The situation could have been fixed soon enough, but there wasn't even a comment on it from the local government, so the villagers had to contend with what was left behind. Lucky for them though, the media focused their attention on the plight of the school-going kids. A few weeks later, PT Krakatau Steel, the largest steel producer in the country, built a new bridge effectively putting an end to the risky journey to school. Number 9. Mountainside Road. Bampo Elementary School in Beijing, China, has a bit of a peculiar location tucked away in a mountain. The pupils from the nearby Gangguan village have had to do some not-so-safe treks every day to and from the school, usually accompanied by their head teacher. The road leading to the elementary school is about half a meter wide, cut into the mountainside almost 50 years ago to facilitate irrigation. With the road being too narrow, the children have to walk single file, usually pressing themselves into the mountainside for the occasional farmer to walk past with his cow. While clearly risky, the path is actually the best alternative way of reaching the school, as it takes the youngsters a little less than an hour. A safer route is available, but it'll take the kids nearly 2 hours to reach their school. That's too physically taxing, and it just doesn't sit well with the school program since there's a daily exercise routine before the lessons start. Number 8. A wooden boat. Well, this doesn't seem dangerous until you get down to the finer details. Near India's capital lies a slum at the Delhi-Noida crossing, known for some not-so-great standards of living. Up to 10 school-going youngsters have to share a tiny boat every day to cross the Yamuna River, and that's basically just a small part of the journey. After the treacherous boat ride, the learners have to take a 1-hour walk before finally reaching their schools. That means waking up as early as possible, usually 6 a.m., even for kids as young as 6. A safer alternative route is a bit bogged up with traffic, which will take the kids at least 2 hours to reach school, so obviously the perilous boat journey is the go-to route. The rather unfortunate way of getting to school is just an extension of what the kids experience in their homes. The makeshift houses are hardly spacious enough, the roofs are largely damaged, and people defecate in the open. Most of the slum dwellers make a living by trading agricultural produce like onions and tomatoes. Number 7. A bamboo raft. Still on the topic of heavy rainfall, residents in Banten province, Indonesia, had to make do without a suspension bridge in 2013 after it was swept away by raging floods, but they still had to move across the Ciberang River, especially the school-going kids. And with the local authorities not being so concerned with fixing the problem, the residents had to work out the solution on their own, which turned out to be a bamboo raft, which got the job done, but with a few limitations. For starters, someone had to steer it and could only carry up to 3 people for safety reasons. Additionally, the raft was only viable as long as the river's water level was low enough. Spikes usually saw a lot of the kids staying home instead of risking their lives further. Clearly, the raft wasn't quite efficient, but the alternatives weren't much better. The first one was the suspension bridge, which is obviously out of the question. The second one was a pretty intact bridge about 2 miles away. To reach it, each pupil would have had to pay an equivalent of $1.2 a day, which meant foregoing food for most of the low-income families. Number 6. Unsecured wooden bridges. Zhuangjiang village in China's Hunan province has a bit of a frightening location. Located high up in the Batagong Mountains, the village is a challenge for anyone trying to get in or out, including the youngsters thirsty for knowledge. But people still have to move, especially the school-going kids whose only school just happens to be way below their mountaintop homes. A school run here typically means descending for several feet every day, each time hoping you don't miss a step. Thanks to some ingenious locals, the terrifying drops are dotted with unsecured wooden bridges that make the whole journey at least bearable for most of the young learners. Those who don't wish to use the bridges are welcome to take a 4-hour alternative route, which is obviously not a very good option if you're going to school. Interestingly, a road is another good workaround, but the authorities aren't so keen on implementing it, despite repeated pleas by the locals. Apparently, a road here will cost over $13 million, which a local official termed a bit expensive, considering there are only about 100 people who will use it. Number 5. Frozen highway. Chilling mornings are a problem on a school day. Now, imagine walking on ice for over 60 miles. That's what the children in India's Zanskar Valley have to deal with in winter. Tucked away in the Great Himalayan Range, the valley doesn't have much going for it in terms of easy passages to and from the outside world. There is only a single, fairly modern road that's only passable during the summer. In winter, it's blocked by heavy snowfall, pushing the locals and anyone who wants to visit the area to the Zanskar River, the only passage. Long before the road was built, the river was the only way for traveling into the valley, which kept the area away from the prying outside eyes. As a result, it's actually the closest thing you'll find to the ancient Tibetan Buddhist culture. That is slowly changing as more hiking enthusiasts come in every winter to have a test of the 60-mile cold walk. The journey isn't all that easy though. To a rookie, tumbling on the frozen river and occasionally slipping under the ice is quite common. The locals, on the other hand, maneuver the frozen landscape quite smoothly as their luggage and school-going kids tag along. Number 4. Walking a tightrope. Turns out that tightrope walking isn't a reserve for the acrobats only. In Indonesia's village of Batu Basuk in Sumatra, kids have to cross a river on nothing but a tightrope, suspended about 30 feet above the water. After the rather uncomfortable ordeal, the pupils walk about 7 miles of forest cover before they reach school. But the situation wasn't always this way. The crossing, that is. Initially, moving back and forth across the river was fairly easy thanks to a suspension bridge that got swept away by floodwaters. For whatever reason, no repairs were forthcoming despite the bridge's obvious importance to the school-going kids. But hey, they were at least fortunate enough to have the tightropes up, although there's something to be said about safety. Being remnants of a collapsed bridge means the ropes might not be in great shape themselves, so it might just be a matter of time before they're gone too. That being said, the tightropes have served the kids for years without issues, which means they're probably better than they appear. Number 3. Inflated tire tubes. A tightrope suddenly seems like a good option compared to this. In Philippines' Rizal province, young learners had to resort to the only way they could find to make it across a river: inflated tire tubes. And that's not because a bridge was swept away by raging floods or something. There was never one in the first place, so the young ones had to get a bit creative. It gets the job done, but they have to overlook a lot of issues like toppling and having to half swim the remaining distance. And when the rains come knocking, the nifty workaround becomes too dangerous, leading some to miss classes or stay at their relatives' homes on the other side of the river. It's a pretty hectic situation, but petitions to the government hadn't yielded much when the story caught media attention. Number 2. A narrow cliffside path. China does seem to have tons of schools in its mountainous regions. This popular photo, taken in Xinjiang, is of a fairly popular school around the world because of its risky location. The cliffside paths are dangerous enough, but that isn't the only hurdle students have to face. The entire journey itself is about 124 miles, covered purely on foot since, the terrain doesn't permit any faster and better means of transportation. Additionally, there's always the risk of crashing into one of the raging rivers along the way, a risk that's not too hard to imagine given the uncomfortably tiny widths of the cliffside paths. Falling rocks are also something to watch out for, while the bridges, on the other hand, don't help that much either. With just 2 pieces of wood, being extra careful is something the kids have to excel at if they want to make it to school safely. The journey is so dangerous that the learners are usually accompanied by chaperones to help with the more difficult parts or to carry some of the youngsters. That being said, the adults can't step in all the time in some spots since they can only accommodate a person at a time. In such instances, it's up to the kids to pull through safely. As you can imagine, it's a long trek, taking 2 days and 1 night, according to the state-owned CCTV. Number 1. Ziplining. Ziplining is something some of us might do once in a while during vacation, but for school-going kids in Colombia's Rio Negro Valley, it's how they get to school and back every day. If that seems too much, the other option is a hike on a mountainside, which can take as much as 2 hours to complete. Of course, that's a lot of time to spend on the road, and you can only wake up so early, so the ziplining route is the only viable solution, not to just waking up early, but saving tons of time. For their journey, the kids hang about 750 feet above the canyon and cover about half a mile for a single trip, sometimes cruising at speeds of up to 55 miles an hour. That's for those who are old enough to hold on tight. The younger pupils are usually carried in sacks by either their parents or older siblings. Besides being a reliable route to school, the zipline is also used by locals to run various errands that require traveling to the nearby town of Ecopayz. And since the government will have nothing to